exception to that remark. Grunge was a thing. It will always
forever. Grunge forever.
Yeah, and I think what James Carville is trying to do is what David Axelrod is trying to do. It's what Jessica Tarlov tries to do. They try to tell people the truth to get voters to pay attention, because although the Bidenites are wonderful propagandists and they're telling all of us how rosy the economy is and how stable the global picture is, actually the president is in real trouble. And unless you telegraph that to people, they're going to be very comfortable with some of the economic numbers that are coming out right now, even though a lot of them are feeling the pain. So they're trying to be truth tellers. I don't know what John Fetterman is doing other than trying to pick a fight with every faction of the Democrat Party. That boy ain't right.
Jessica, where are you on the Fetterman-Carville, saga, the difference there?
I'm actually Team Carville and I'm Team Fetterman. I think that this is healthy. I think that Carville still has a place in the party. We are the big tent. He's responsible for one of the more successful modern presidencies, ones that made Democrats and Republicans happy. When you say it's the economy stupid, you're saying that because James Carville was the one who figured it out and said we should be running on this, in fact. And I'm also with John Fetterman insofar as, and I appreciate how you opened this and saying that we're trying to be truth tellers about this, that at this point, Joe Biden is running. There is no primary. There's no getting him off the ballot. And so it doesn't actually help Democrats to be having this conversation about, Dean Phillips isn't really going to get it done, but is Gavin Newsom going to get in? Is Gretchen Whitmer going to get in? This is who the candidate is. And there is, like we talked about yesterday on the show, a lot of positive things about the Biden agenda that you could be discussing. And Fetterman has been doing a good job of that. Carville is in a little bit of a grinchy mood, will come around. But it's hard when you have, he's a party elder. What are you going to do? Right? Well, he goes on TV. He gives these.
James Carville.
No, Biden is a party elder. Trump is a party elder, and Carville is a party elder.
The numbers are the numbers. And comparatively, historically, Biden's approval, according to Gallup from December, sits at 39%. Trump's was at 45%. Obama's 43%. Yeah. So he's having some problems here, Joey. And instead of coming out and having a year-end press conference to talk to the American people about what he thinks are achievements, he bailed on that. And when the White House was asked about it, they said, well, he had a press conference with the president of Ukraine, and therefore that is enough.
Yeah, it's funny. We had this reporting a couple of weeks ago that Biden was upset at kind of what the public perception was, and he told his team to circle the wagons and come up with a strategy. And then we realized the strategy is to get him further away from everything. I mean, right now, Anthony Blinken might be the most powerful person in D.C. Doesn't that make you worried? I mean, he's the one that's leading the charge on what's happening with the wars overseas. He's leading or at least the diplomacy. He's leading the charge on the southern border. We're not in a good place when it comes to perception of leadership. I'll give Fetterman and Carville all the credit in the world as far as being party guys and having a disagreement there. And, there's a difference between what you've caused and what you're responsible for. That's the lesson number one in leadership. I don't really care if Joe Biden's caused all the problems. I care that as Americans, we don't feel like he has the wherewithal to fix them or the team to fix them or the policies to fix them. And that's going to hurt him. And it's going to hurt him with young voters that care much more about if they can get a job and pay for an apartment. Mm-hmm. And it's hurting him with minorities. And those are two factions that Democrats think they have a monopoly on.
So, Tyrus, what is your perspective on vacation from vacation while people are having a hard time with things like inflation?
It's never a good look. And wherewithal, Johnny, that was the perfect word, because what we're seeing from our president is lack thereof. He barely speaks to the press, so when he does speak to the press, it's more heavier. It has more, and his last two press conferences have been brutal. So now we're seeing the Democrats are turning, the moderate Democrats are saying, hey, you had Mayor Adams who was like, he won't even speak to me. He's not helping at all. The sanctuary cities are a mess. And then Carville, who lives in Louisiana, where I live, is speaking on what he's seeing, the same things that I'm seeing in the city of New Orleans. And he's seeing it's not just in the cities, it's spreading everywhere. So people are going, that's why we're seeing the low numbers and the complaining, and where we're not getting from, like previous administration, if there was stuff going on, Barack Obama would give us a speech, a press conference, he'd break it down. Whether you agree or disagree, you have the information, do what you want. We're not getting those explanations. We're getting if deferred to Trump did it, or, well, we already spoke. And that's the scary part. I think his health has to be deteriorating a little bit because we're seeing less and less of the impromptu speeches. But no more talking to the reporters from the helicopter. No more of this stuff. And he really should have had a press conference going into the
But
new
don't
year.
you think this is just the usual partisan bickering? Because we were all on TV during the Obama years, and I heard he's nonstop golfing. I went back and looked at the numbers. He took 358 personal days of 8 years. Unless you're Jimmy Carter, who only took 78 days across his 4 years, you go on vacation. Biden is pacing the same as Trump, except Trump was going to his own
But this is
places
the
and
difference,
personally
Jessica.
profiting
But the,
off
he
of
was
that.
doing press
difference was
conferences.
he was talking
he
to
was
the press every
rambling
single
at
day.
people.
I'll take a ramble.
There was access. He would talk to them
75-minute
multiple
ramble.
times.
Biden gives you a ramble, and you're upset about that.
No. There's a difference between a ramble, like ramble is I'm talking fast and saying a lot of things, than going.
Maybe Trump was giving a rumble.
A rumble.
But he was actually going back and forth and engaging the press
Yes.
and answering questions. Yes, he was insulting people.
Right.
But Jim Acosta made a career by standing up and being a blowhard and was so incredibly disrespectful when you contrast him with Peter Doocy,
Yeah.
who would love to ask the president some questions right now.
lot.
And a 2x2 with Zelensky isn't the same
Yeah,
thing as a press
exactly.
conference when you have to answer about immigration and crime and the economy.
It's a lot
not
easier
all
to take
good.
golfing vacations when the interest rates are low, the economy's doing good, and you haven't started or been involved in 3 wars. As a matter of fact, you didn't start any as a president. So the things that we're talking, and the border was a heck of a lot better for most of Trump's terms. So yeah, he took vacation days. Biden's outpacing Trump actually. Trump didn't take 400
So
in his whole
Jessica, I
first
mean,
term.
the White House has this problem where there's a disconnect between what people are feeling in their everyday lives on the economy and what the White House continues to say. And it's not the president saying it on a regular basis. It's the White House press secretary.
Yeah.
It's their economic advisors. Do you think that he would benefit from giving some more access to reporters, not to just answer 1 or 2 questions at a press conference about something happening far away from the country, but about issues that are affecting Americans every single day in a year-long press conference that they are not going to do?
Whether it's end of year, start of year, just because it's Tuesday, I think that President Biden does well when he speaks to the public. When he talks about, he goes to manufacturing plants, he goes to chips plants, et cetera, talks about the jobs that they're bringing back there. He is the ambassador of Bidenomics. And I have been very critical of his communications team, that they are not making it work, whether that's a strategy problem or a delivery problem. And I think that there are some great people who show up, and I love that they come on Fox, like Jared Bernstein is out here all the time. John Kirby is out here all the time talking about what the administration is doing.
Yeah.
But it's too far and few between.
He is the president, and he does have the ability to say, I want to talk to the press whenever I want. He's not doing that.
His word sound's
All
got
right,
a lot of sugar in
we
it.
got to go. Shocking new details on the deranged lunatic who stabbed 2 teenage girls while ranting about how he wanted to kill all white people.
Repeat offenders leaving a trail of carnage in liberal cities. A career criminal with 17 prior arrests randomly stabbing 2 teenage girls who were visiting New York City on Christmas Day. The lunatic reportedly yelled, "I want all the white people dead." Thankfully, both the girls sustained non-life-threatening injuries. Cops arresting 36-year-old homeless man Stephen Hutcherson for the ruthless attack. He's facing multiple hate crime charges, including attempted murder. Just 2 weeks ago, Hutcherson pleaded guilty to 3rd-degree assault after he reportedly threatened to kill a man, but the judge let him out. The victim in that previous attack telling the New York Post that Hutcherson shouldn't have been on the streets at all. And New York City Mayor Eric Adams, well, he's weighing in on what happened.
Anytime you have incidents in these high-profile locations, it sends the feeling of, people don't feel safe. And that's why we have to make sure we, zero in, make the arrest as soon as possible, and make sure we get those repeated offenders off our streets.
Kendi, maybe people don't feel safe because somebody with 17 priors, including pulling a gun on a man, was walking around on the streets.
It's Grand Central. Grand Central is one of the places where when you're visiting the city and you want to go somewhere iconic and Christmassy, that's where you go. Nice family from South America sitting down, trying to have breakfast. And this guy comes up, stabs one girl in the back, the other in the thigh. They're very lucky that they weren't murdered because that's what he was trying to do. But he's had this intent. The prior with the gun and the man, he was telling him, I don't care if they gave you a green card, go back to where you're from. And, he's racist. He's violent. I don't know what these judges are waiting for to happen next, but that's what is making the city feel unsafe, is because it is unsafe, because they're doing a really, really bad job of keeping violent people who've already committed violent felonies off the street, because guess what they're going to do? And it doesn't matter if it's organized retail theft or assault. They're going to do it again. They feel emboldened. I get it. He's mentally ill, but the judge releases him over and over and over again, but to no psychiatric care. It is mind-boggling, and it's not just about feeling unsafe. The mayor is also not doing enough to work with the DA to make sure these people are kept off the streets.
Jessica, that's kind of the premise here. Is this guy is insane, I guess, but he's also racist and trying to kill people. He's violent. And so with 17 prior offenses, the most recent one being pulling a gun out, or allegedly, holding it to a guy that wasn't white and saying, why are you working for white people? And then threatening to kill him for going to work. He gets arrested, and now you have a justice system that says maybe it's because he has mental problems that they don't want to put him in jail. Well, I know that there's a lot of talk in this city about people, about the places where mentally ill people used to go that are shut down, and there's reasons for that. So then what's the answer to it?
Make more of them that run properly and treat people who are mentally ill with dignity, and they can get the care that they need. Make sure that our shelter system isn't overcrowded with people who shouldn't be in it. And this is, I have very little bad to say about undocumented people who are here in the country, but they have taken shelter beds away from New Yorkers and people from Chicago and Baltimore and all these places who have a right to be part of the system here. And that's a big problem. So there was abuse, should be creating more. I'm not for the island and wherever, like sending them away to some sort of colony, but obviously this needs to be addressed. And I think that Mayor Adams is doing the right thing in talking about feelings, because crime and safety is one of those issues that is a feeling issue. The statistics, and we went over this last week, the new FBI stats do not hold up, that things are worse than they were. We've gotten so much better over year from 2022 to 2023. Violent crime, property crime, murder has plummeted at the fastest rate ever recorded.
Well,
those are the facts. No, but there was obviously a huge spike at the beginning of the pandemic, and it has come down substantially. It is safer today for us to walk outside than it was at this time last year. Period. End of story. But you can't change how people feel about it. If they see that their products are locked up at a CVS, if this is happening in Grand Central where you feel safe, or you should feel safe. Penn Station never felt as safe as Grand Central to me.
Yes.
But that is the problem. But we need proper, humane care.
But
for these sick people.
On the statistics issue, when it comes to cities like New York, a lot of crimes aren't actually properly recorded. So therefore, the crime stats are going down, even though when Mayor Adams says, well, people don't feel safe. No, it's not they don't feel safe. There's a big difference between feeling away and then reality of not being safe. If you can't sit down at Grand Central, one of the most famous tourist destinations in the entire world, on Christmas morning with your family without having your lung collapsed by a 17-time offender, you are unsafe. And that is happening all over the place with people randomly stabbing girls, bodega owners. And it's so interesting that in this city, they're really tough on someone who is wanting to follow the rules, wants to get a handgun to defend themselves. If they break any of the laws, they're going straight to jail. But this guy pulls out a gun and threatens someone with a deadly weapon, and he gets out back on the street so he can victimize these young girls from another country again. And that's the whole point. If you let these people out of jail under the guise of mental illness, which is not an excuse, by the way, especially if they're violent, they're going to hurt someone else. You are putting innocent people in positions where their lives will be changed forever as a result of those decisions. It doesn't have to be that way.
The shopkeeper with video surveillance footage showing that he was defending himself with a knife, he goes to jail, no questions asked. And you have to rally to get him out of jail for defending himself with a knife. This guy's got 17 prior tires. He uses a knife, and, let's hope he stays in jail this time.
Here's what's disheartening. The police department, the defunded police department, did their job 17 times.
Yeah.
They've arrested this guy.
Yeah.
Men and women in blue are doing their part. Then he goes to a DA, and he's sent right back out. This guy's claiming he wants to kill white people because he's figured out that is a defense now. He's oppressed. Even though he's stabbing people from South America and a man of color, doesn't matter. It was they're doing the Hamas thing where we attack, pillage, do whatever we want to, and if you say anything to us, it was because the other group started first a million years ago. So he's doing these things. He says, I want to kill all white people. It's a defense now. It's a defense. He feels oppressed. He feels something wrong. The way that they're tweaking the system in these cities, everyone should be afraid. 17 times this man was put in cuffs, book him, Johnson, and he was turned out in the street. So if you have daughters, and it doesn't matter what color you are, if you're a minority and you're out there going, well, he wants to kill white people. This dude is killing or stabbing or attempting to kill 2 girls from South America. So he doesn't really care. He just knows what to say. So whenever you hear the mental illness thing, he's smart enough to know what to yell, because that will get him attention from these groups who are saying he's oppressed.
Yeah, and I think Katie brings up probably the best point about this is that statistics are not layered year after year the same when you don't have as many cops writing as many police reports, and a lot of crimes are looked at as, we know this person isn't going to be held accountable. And so I think that's part of the problem.
17 times they did the job.
All right, from banning gas stoves to cracking down on washing machines, Democrats are declaring war on your appliances, but maybe not theirs.
Democrats had a busy year declaring war on appliances in the name of green energy. But one liberal leader got a pass on her gas. Kamala is getting burned online, get it, for posting this photo of her and the second hubby, Doug Emhoff, cooking up some Christmas beef Wellington. Sounds kinky. On a gas stove, which the regulating obsessed Biden administration considered banning over health concerns. And it's not just gas stoves. Biden's anti-consumer crusade is targeting 4 more types of appliances, including but not limited to dishwashers, air conditioners, washing machines, and furnaces. Had enough, nanny state? I've been telling you. Well, how about Mayor Pete going after your wheels?
The share of EVs has been dramatically increasing every single year, and that's continuing. Now, our goal is by the end of this decade to be about half and half. I don't know a lot of people who think that Americans in 2050 are still going to be driving that old technology, that combustion technology that we inherited
Americans
from
like
the
it.
20th century.
Americans
but the big
like it.
question is, well, no, you're not going to meet a lot of people who ever go back after they've gone electric, and I think that really tells you something.
It tells me that you're an elitist, Secretary Pete. So, Joey, let's talk about this a little bit, because there are people in this country who are still quite fond of the combustion engine.
NASCAR got fuel injection in like the last 5 years. And what I mean by that, the reason why NASCAR, with all technology in the world, waited that long for fuel injection is because people at home had spent some time in their life tinkering with the carburetor, and they wanted that connection with those people. People care about things they can put their hands on and fix. You can't do that with an electronic vehicle. You can't do that with a gas-powered vehicle that has too many computers running everything else about it. I know that because I've got one that's been in the shop too many times because it has more computers than it does cylinders. So the idea that this technology is to the place where people want to abandon something that makes sense to them for something that spontaneously combusts, or something that they can't run on E for 5 miles to get to the gas station. They're going to have to wait 2 hours to. EVs don't match up with how Americans live their lives. If they ever get there, it's a different conversation. But they're not there, and they're not going to be there at 2050. And the idea that we're going to take away something like a stove, I mean, fire departments can't make you put out a fire during a burn ban if you need it for heat. So they're going to make you get rid of your stove that you need to cook with until the power goes out?
Yeah, exactly. You can't cook on an electric stove if there's a power outage. And with all this climate change, I mean, we've seen in Texas and California, they've got brownouts and blackouts. And if there's a weather catastrophe, you just want people to die? Tyrus, that sounds cruel.
No, it sounds like, well, they're full of it, as politely as I can say during the 5 p.m. hour. This is just more of the hustle. Pete's like, we're going to be by 2050. You have no idea. You can't even figure out how to get the trains to get from point A to point B, oh, Petey. And now you're going to tell us.
Or the planes.
Or the planes, you know, but now in 250. And again, it's the unaffected. They say these things. Pete was smart enough to do it from a cubicle. Because if you went to his house, there'd be a gas stove in it. You know, so they literally, and the thing with the cars, listen, the more this stuff happens, they want to have the effect where people are completely dependent on the government. And libertarians and all of us like, No, I'm going to go the other way. I'm currently shopping for like a 57 Chevy. I'm looking for something that if the worst case scenario is I can take that moonshine I made from the summer, pour it in my tank, and get away. But without worrying about my car freezing up or being tracked or have a little voice tell me, oh, you said you were going to CVS. Why are you making a right at the gas station? But that's what you're waiting for. That's what you're coming. Or you've been allotted 15 miles today left on your 100
It's
for the
all
week.
about control.
It's all about control. They're not going to do it. When the president turns in his Corvette and trades it in for an EV, then I'll be like, let's pay attention. But again, no, the EVs, just the fact where they're getting it from, you're making us dependent on China, which should be the last thing we would want to do. Because he who owns the rights to those battery fields owns the entire world. And it's a money-making hustle. And to your point, why are people sticking with combustibles? Because they know that they at least can hold on to their freedoms with it, just like their
but
guns
also-
and their trucks.
Word of mouth is what gets people to buy new things
Right.
and to do a total technology shift. But the problem is with the EVs, there are so many more just sitting idle. They're just sitting on
It's
showroom floors.
not just that. You just said word of mouth. Most of the people who get the EVs come up to you and they talk down to you like, "Oh, I'm gone electric."
Right.
You know,
It's
it's
a
like
class
this.
issue.
It's just like this. We call it flossing. You know, and then they're the first ones. They're flossing about their EV, and then they call you up. Hey, it's really cold. I think I can catch a ride?
They feel better about
Because my
themselves.
EV won't start.
It
the
is
plug
virtue
froze.
signaling,
Like,
but if they were so great, people would be snapping them up with all the credits the federal government is offering.
The whole forced EV transfer under the guise of climate change is a total scam. Electric vehicles are not climate neutral. They are not carbon neutral. They take mining in places where you don't want to look because it is so severe for the people getting that cobalt and everything out of
Modern
the ground with their
slavery.
slave labor. And then what do? They put it on ships that use diesel fuel to get it here. And when they go away or sit in lots like they are because it's costing Ford $36,000 per vehicle that they're making in a loss with the government subsidy. And the government's just going to tax us more to subsidize this transfer because it's about control. And when it comes to the consequences of this, how do you think that food gets out of the ground with diesel? It's not getting out of the ground with electric vehicles. And you have these proposals to go after things like gas stoves. Well, that seems silly. In New York, they passed a ban for gas stove hookups for most residential buildings starting in 2026. But there are exceptions to hospitals, industrial buildings. Well, why are there exceptions? Because fossil fuels work. We have our modern lifestyle as a result of fossil fuels, and to take it away in a forced aspect like this is going to cause a lot of human suffering that they're not telling you about.
And it's not just gas stoves, dishwashers, washing machines, furnaces, air conditioners. I do not want to be a stinky European, Jessica.
You won't have to be.
Thank you.
Because all of these things are just proposals. And odds are,
this
I guess,
implemented.
yeah, the New York one, so that's new construction. It's not going into people's homes and telling you that you have to undo it. There are a lot of carve-outs. But no one has mentioned why there's any conversation about getting rid of gas stoves, and it's because of childhood asthma. So gas stoves are responsible for 12% of the childhood asthma cases in the
That's not
U.S.
true.
Yes, it is true. 21% of the cases in Illinois, 20% of the cases in California. It's a health and safety risk more than it's just about liberals wanting to exert maximum control over the populace that we think that we're smarter than. And it's not going to be implemented on a federal level. So yes, in New York City, if you have a problem with it, I'm sure restaurants are going to carve outs too, because you go to a steakhouse and they're not going to have a gas stove. That's not going to happen for people. But you can't forget the difference between what is actually happening and what could happen.
But but there have been regulations in air conditioning units. Absolutely. They're more expensive to put in. And they're not necessarily, they're certainly not more cost efficient. They're also not more energy efficient. And in California, you're going to be paying upwards of 50% more a year for your electricity when it becomes fully renewable.
Well, when it becomes
NTR, not that rad.
Not that rad.
That's right.
No one is coming into your house and seeing that your
just wait.
temperature gauge, is at 68 and saying,
That's what
no,
they do.
you're a
Try
72.
getting a certificate of occupancy in California. They are coming into your house, they are nitpicking everything, and they're making damn sure that you are living up to every overregulated letter. And then they won't give you the occupancy, and then you're squatting. Thank God libertarians believe in squatters' rights.
And that's why I live in Louisiana.
With James Carville, which is odd. Well, forget about quiet quitting.
Should have seen our note.
I'll tell you about a brand new way new workers are phoning it in. Maybe it's you. It's next.
Quitting, bare minimum Mondays, and now coffee badging. The post-pandemic workforce keeps pumping out new ways to put in the least possible effort and avoid return to office mandates. The latest is the aforementioned coffee badging, which describes workers who go into the office long enough to drink a cup of coffee, only to slip out of the building. It's apparently a way to comply with the minimum in-office work requirements. A stunning 58% of hybrid employees said they were joining the trend. Katie,
Well,
I didn't think this was real.
yeah, this is a little shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, I am a proponent of people working in the environment that they are most efficient. If you look
Yeah.
at these statistics, 22% want to be in the office full time, 37% want hybrid, and 41% want to be full remote. There are a lot of jobs where you lose a lot of efficiency by commuting to and from the office. There's a lot of wasted time in the office space for people who are maybe coding or doing
Yeah.
work that doesn't require that you need to be in a collaborative space. But if this is the rule where your boss wants you to come to the office and they want you to be involved in the office community and the work that you're doing, this kind of cutting corners is pretty infuriating. And if this is the job that you're in, the leadership of these offices has the opportunity to say, if we see you badging in and out and coming for a cup of coffee and you're not actually doing your job, that's a problem. But at the same time, they're having trouble keeping workers. So the workers have the advantage in a lot of these situations.
Tyrus, in your book, you have some advice for millennials.
Why not Gen Z?
Well, because what can we say to them? I'm a Gen Xer. You know what I'm saying? We're boots on the ground. We work. You know, but you work hard in the beginning so you can chill out at the end. What somehow got mixed up is they think it's chill in the beginning and then turn it on at some point at the end. Kids, when it's the end, it's the end. Okay? This isn't a fashion choice. It's withering. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Oh, I feel
That's a
that.
good
you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not, this is the time when I should be looking for my exit strategy. But I dilly-dallied to be polite, and now I have to work for forever. But the point is first of all, what job is this? Because because I would love a job where I could just check in
It's,
on the
it's-
Gutfeld show? I'll call in the middle of the segment. What it is, Tyrus is checking in. How are we doing? All right. Knock, knock. Who's there? Click. I told my joke. I'm good for the month. So I've never had a job like this other than it sound like computer jobs, coding, because I've never had a computer job. I've had a lot of jobs. But what job can you just show up, grab a cup of Joe, and go? I want to know what that job is because I might want to fluff up my resume and slide in there to just have a cup of Joe and go. Like, that's an amazing job. I don't think this is, I'm with Jessica. I refuse to believe that this is a real
Or at least that
thing.
it's 58%.
Because the only other thing is if you are working your way up, trying to get somewhere and you start at the bottom, that's the last time you don't get to show up. You have to be present. Especially if you work hands-on, supermarkets, construction. You can't just coffee badge. You got to get your little fingernails got to get this stuff called dirt underneath them. You got to work, America.
There's this other trend, Kennedy, this career cushioning, which is constantly keeping your resume updated for networking events. But that actually seems like what you should be doing.
But this is the problem with millennials and Gen Zers. No offense, Katie. I think you're wonderful. And I
I'm a
don't.
millennial, too. I'm just old.
Oh, yeah, I guess you are.
We're not Gen Z.
No, you were absolutely not Gen Zers. I've birthed some of them. I know the difference. But they think they invented everything. They think they invented they think they invented leggings. They probably think they invented coffee and avocados.
Or scrunchies.
Oh, scrunchies were around in the 80s.
Fanny packs.
Yes, they did not invent fanny packs or fluorescent colors, and they did not invent the idea of maybe keeping one eye on the bulletin board and figuring out if there's a better job around the corner and making sure you've got your resume all built up and fluffed. So if this is your jumping off point, you go and you leap to a new opportunity. Everyone has been doing that forever, and I'm sick of people on TikTok trying to take credit for things that have been happening for decades.
Human debauchery has been around forever. No one, each group thinks they invented it. You didn't.
Amen.
He really didn't.
Joey, what do you think?
Yeah, I didn't invent anything. That's why I work for a living instead of getting that mailbox money. And I think that's what all the Gen Zers want, are good mailbox money. I used to hear go build some car washes, you get some mailbox money, or like self-storage.
Laundromats.
Yeah, every time I hear about it, it's already past its prime. So I just never got in front of anything. But with that being said, the people who can coffee badge probably work for the federal government, because like 20% of the federal government does all the work. The other 80% have probably been coffee badging since, the 90s, since badging was able to be a thing. And so maybe that's where this is happening. I don't know much about corporate America. This is the closest thing to corporate America I've ever worked in, and this is a very different job here. But when it comes to Gen Zers specifically, I understand the argument of work from wherever you're most efficient. But efficiency is only part of it. If you have 3 tasks to do and you can get those 3 tasks done in some form, working from home, that's great. Now you're efficient. But what about creativity? What about social skills? My son's 14 years old. He's absolutely brilliant. I challenge him to be social, but I see a difference in him and all of his friends compared to where we were. It's easy for us to say, yeah, you can work from home. But in our 20s and 30s, we were going to college and going to work in a social environment, learning to, take an insult. Learning to, not be upset by being misgendered or something like that. And so I think all of this really feeds into itself. We now have a generation of adults that came to adulthood just during COVID. They're 4 or 5 years into it now. Yeah. And they haven't seen the world the way we did and learned from the other people in it the way we did. They learned from them here. And we know how different of a version of yourself you are on social media than you are in real life. And so, we have a generation that can do a TikTok video and be as vulnerable as they want to in some way, but can't walk into a dry cleaner and have an interaction with someone that English is their second language. And that's the problem with not having people come to work and interact with each other, not learning the idea of we're only as strong as our weakest link, or everybody has something worth investing in. So even if they annoy you, maybe you should see what it is they do well and learn how to work with them. We don't get that anymore.
Joey, I gotta correct you on one thing. I grew up in a car wash, and there was no mailbox money. I was like shoveling mud in a blizzard, okay, taking out the trash. So just to clarify, there's no mailbox money coming at the car wash.
All right, the fastest.
Welcome back. Time for the fastest. First up, now, this is just plain rude. An unfortunate passenger filming, every window passenger's nightmare is someone filming over your shoulders. Check this out. Okay, well, that dude's getting way too close for comfort so he can take photos of the outside of the plane. You know what? The more I watch it, the more... No. You know what? It just so happens she has the camera in perfect position to catch him. Like, enough of this. This is you're going to have to take heat on this one. Just like when DX messes up, we got to own it. This is the problem with the group. They try to create random acts of, oh, I can't believe this happened to me. She's looking, she's set up. He clearly asked to take a picture. I don't believe this. You were with me, Joey. Tell me, this is manufactured.
I'm going to take this right back to the last segment. She doesn't have the skills to have a conversation with him to go, hey, maybe don't do that. How about we, take 3 pictures, or interact with him enough to where either she realizes maybe he's a decent person and now it's cute like the old man wants to take pictures instead of invasive, or she can stand up for herself and say, don't do it. I do take issue with the characterization. Every window seat passenger's worst nightmare is watching the engine fall off the window.
Yes.
Right? That's not a big, that doesn't kill you.
The goose going right
The
into
person
the
next to you
engine.
giving birth, something way more stickier.
I'm a window seat flyer. So if a guy reaches over me repeatedly, you know what I'm going to do?
Punch him.
Latch onto his arm and go, my precious! And then just hold onto his arm and not let it go the whole flight. Because
You'll counter his creep with a higher creep.
A much higher creep. The only way to do
Jessica,
it.
you're a diplomat. How would you handle that?
I don't get people that like the window seat.
Oh.
I'm aisle all the way. I go to the bathroom like 700 times on a flight, and I just can't. I feel so guilty even asking one time to get out that I wouldn't do it. I do like the staged analysis of this, but I guess as an elder millennial, I'm terrible with my phone. So I would never have been able to capture it
I mean,
Perfectly.
the play. Explain on behalf of all Gen Zs. Explain this.
I'm not
sorry.
Gen Z.
I don't have to be. I don't have to be a scientist. Oh, that's right.
You're
millennial.
misgenerationing me.
I'll show myself out.
Misgenerationing me.
But this is made up.
Katie's off the
All you have to
made
say
up.
is please don't
I've
reach
seen
across
people
me.
lean in before, and if I were in her position, I would ask if he would want me to take it for him.
Yeah.
That way he
There's
knew
a million
it wasn't
more things to
appropriate.
do besides keep staring out the window. I feel like this might even be a parent. That's how I feel.
That's her dad now?
I feel like this is a parent. Yeah. This was. You know what? We're done with this segment. I'm so upset with it. One more thing is up next.
It's time now for one more thing. Kennedy.
My hometown of Portland, Oregon may have a horrible mayor and an even worse DA, but we have a great airport at PDX. They have therapy llamas to calm weary travelers' nerves. So when you're walking around the Portland International Airport, give them a kiss.
That is awesome.
Llamas love you.
And they
Little
can keep you
antlers.
warm, too.
Right.
Llama, mama.
Yes.
Wow, that llama spit. Okay.
They do.
All right. Well, speaking of spit, I'm spitting some facts here. I've got
There
my
we go.
stand-up tours going. It's already sold out in Escondido, California. So we're doing an extra night, an encore performance. So we're going to add more dates as the year goes, depending on my coffee badging at the old job here at Fox News. And of course, tonight I'm hosting the Gutfeld Show, and I pretty much have half the cast
Oh,
already
look
here.
at that.
Oh, nice. Double dose.
Kennedy, Katie, we're just doing big things. So check us out. And if you get a chance, check out my new book.
There you go. All right,
That's
Joey.
me far away.
Yeah, check this out. So this truck driver had his worst nightmare come to fruition. My worst nightmare. It looks like something out of a Spider-Man movie. That's insane. Thankfully, the firemen, my brother-in-laws are firemen, love him. They rescued him. He just is not going to be able to have insurance to drive anymore, probably.
All right. Well, thank you, firefighters, always, and first responders. That's it for us. See you tomorrow.
Welcome to a special edition of Jesse Waters Prime Time. I'm Rachel Campos Duffy, and I'm in for Jesse. Biden's cabinet met with the Mexican president today. The meeting was closed to the press, and Biden's team didn't talk to reporters or hold a press conference. But we know that the Mexican president wants America to send even more money to Mexico and other Latin American countries, money to fund the governments that keep sending illegal migrants to America. Nobody in that meeting wanted to secure the border. There's too much in it for everyone involved. This trip is more cynical and sinister than you can imagine. Now, while the idea is to make you think Joe Biden is doing something about the flood of migrants coming to America, the meetings are actually about how they can facilitate the flow more efficiently. During the meeting, the Mexican president actually said he wants America to reopen border crossings. This is not a prevention mission. It's a coordination and funding mission. Meanwhile, the caravans are gaining steam and pushing north. The latest caravan could get as big as 15,000 illegals. They come from 24 different countries like Iran, Syria, and Senegal. Where's Biden? On a tropical island, sipping on a pina colada. He just got back from his Christmas vacation, and now he's going on another vacation for a week, this time in the Caribbean. Biden is soaking up the sun while a monster caravan barrels towards an already overwhelmed border. Democrat mayors are starting to feel the pressure.
We cannot continue to do the federal government's job. We have spoken to FEMA and other federal officials who have expressed concern about the border's surge but not offered additional help. We need action, and we need it now. The federal government must take responsibility and lead on this humanitarian crisis instead of leaving it for cities and localities to handle.
We cannot do this alone. We need more support from the federal government. We need the federal government to lean in and provide more financial assistance. All of our cities have reached a point where we are either close to capacity or nearly out of room. Without significant intervention from the federal government.
Make no mistake, these mayors are not calling for the border to be closed. They just want more federal money to process illegals. And what about small border towns like Eagle Pass? They only have a population of 30,000, but they get thousands of migrants coming through their town. Here's their mayor.
This is unacceptable. Our city here in Eagle Pass, we've been getting slammed with 2,000 to 3,000 people a day. And it's just an unfair, unethical situation. What's going on here in Eagle Pass, we feel ignored by the federal government. I've called to the government that we need action.
Biden is breaking records in the number of known terrorists and Chinese nationals who are crossing through our country. Our open border is one of our biggest national security threats. My next guest is an Arizona rancher who is raising the alarm about cartel scouts on American mountains. Jim Chilton is here now. Jim, thank you for joining us tonight. Tell me about what you're seeing in the mountains, our mountains.
My ranch, it has 5.5 miles of the international boundary, and I have 5 motion-activated cameras. So what I'm seeing is thousands of people coming through dressed in camouflage, carpet shoes, and backpacks. And I'm told by the Border Patrol that at least 20% are packing drugs. 3,050, that means 2,400 are coming through and getting through. The Border Patrol apprehends only about 20%. So I'm really concerned that the focus is not securing the international border. The focus is not on preventing people coming into the United States illegally. And I'm really focused on the possibility of terrorists coming through.
Well, sure. I mean, there have been a record number of known terrorists who have come across the border since Joe Biden was in office. So you alerted Border Patrol. Has the FBI reached out to you to in any way, shape, or form?
No, the FBI hasn't, and the Border Patrol are good guys. Their problem is they've been directed to process people. I haven't seen a Border Patrol agent on my ranch for over 3 months. The border is absolutely open, and the places like Sassabee and Nogales and Lukeville, they're processing people, and they essentially are decoys.
Right. So you actually had the experience, or your wife did, of having MS-13 gangs knock on your door. What happened?
Well, my wife very intelligently realized that they were MS-13s because of their tattoos. And she would not let them in the house and would not let them use a telephone. And she politely asked whether they were hungry, and they said yes. So she made some sandwiches and passed them on, and they had a picnic lunch on our picnic table, and then they went on to
Yeah. Well,
it's really awful. It's really awful.
Well, I'm sure that must have just terrified you when you came home and found out your wife just gave a bunch of gang members lunch on your picnic table. But you're right. This is absolutely intentional. Thank you for alerting us for what's going on. We hope that law enforcement will do more. But sadly, it doesn't look like they will.
Yeah, well, an old cowboy like me wouldn't give you a bum steer.
Jim Chilton, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we're back with a Fox News alert. The Michigan Supreme Court has just handed Democrats a major blow, shooting down an attempt to remove Donald Trump from the state's primary ballot, meaning Donald Trump will stay on the ballot in Michigan. All week, Democrats thought Michigan would be next after a few radical judges on the Colorado Supreme Court ruled that Donald Trump was guilty of a crime he was never charged with. And then they kicked. A deranged lunatic waltzed into Grand Central Station on Christmas Day and stabbed a pair of teenage sisters while screaming about how he wanted to kill all white people. Now, we've learned this guy has a long rap sheet, and he should have been behind bars instead of walking the streets. Fox News correspondent Alexis McAdams has more.
The suspect has quite the rap sheet. This time, police say he stabbed 2 teens, leaving one with a collapsed lung. Investigators say this guy, Stephen Hutcherson, pulled out a knife and stabbed those 2 teenage sisters on Christmas Day. The attack happened while they were eating with their family. The 36-year-old now charged with attempted murder and assault, both as hate crimes. So the attack happened at a restaurant inside of Grand Central Terminal. According to the police report, Hutcherson came in and asked for a table, telling the employee, quote, "I don't want to sit with the black people." That's when he walked over and stabbed both girls who were visiting from Paraguay. According to reports, he then shouted out, "I want all the white people dead." New York City Mayor Eric Adams says this is just another example of someone who shouldn't have been out on the street.
Anytime you have incidents in these high-profile locations, it sends the feeling of, people don't feel safe. And that's why we have to make sure we, zero in, make the arrest as soon as possible, and make sure we get those repeated offenders off our streets.
Sources say Hutcherson has been arrested nearly 24 times, twice in the past 6 months. Just last month, Hutcherson reportedly threatened to kill a guy out in the Bronx. The Bronx DA's office telling Fox News that they suggested inpatient mental health treatment, but Hutcherson declined, saying in part 3 cases were resolved via pleas to the top charge, receiving 15 days jail. And in one case, the court delivered a sentence of a conditional discharge over the people's objection. So the suspect is currently being held in jail. He'll be back in court later this week. Rachel?
Thank you, Alexis. Now, for hundreds of years, America's most elite institutions were always the most respected institutions. When you thought of a quality education, you thought of Harvard, where generations of young adults learned from the best and the brightest. And when you thought of reliable news, you thought of the New York Times, where scrappy journalists chased leads with a pen and paper in hand. Real leads, not made-up lies like the Russia hoax. But these once great American institutions are crumbling. Instead of letting the truth be their guide, they're waging a war of words on the American people. And they're using the same communist tactics used by the Soviets to do it. In an excellent piece on Substack, journalist Michael Schellenberger writes, "The totalitarian manipulation of language is behind the woke destruction of Harvard, the New York Times, and other elite institutions." How? By using words with double meanings that aren't immediately apparent to the people manipulated by the language, end quote. Things like pronouns or the left's growing list of genders. You don't know what it means, but if you don't use their woke terminology, you'll be punished, censored, and excluded. This is exactly what they did in the Soviet Union and in Cuba. In those communist countries, the media and the education systems were controlled by the state. In America, the New York Times and Harvard are the institutions that are manipulating you. And like communists, they look you in the eye when they do it. When Harvard President Claudine Gay was caught in a massive plagiarism scandal, what did Harvard do? They denied it, and they tried to cover it up. Barack Obama, who has his fingers in every destructive cause, privately lobbied Harvard to let Gay keep her job. When the New York Times let Senator Tom Cotton write a piece called "Send in the Troops" during the Floyd riots, the New York Times, pressured by all their leftist staffers, fired its editor. And then they told him to lie about it and pretend that it was his choice to resign. Truth used to be their motto, but that all changed when we filled our schools with Marxist activists from the Ivy League. And then we pumped other cultural institutions, like the media, with liberal radicals. A study finds that only 3% of American journalists are Republicans. It's not a fair fight, and that's the point. Their ideas are unappealing, and they don't work. So they have to control the narrative so they can control you and turn this country into a communist state. Batya Ungar-Sargon is the author of Bad News: How Woke Media is Undermining Democracy. And she joins us now. Batya, it's always great to have you on. So when I think of Claudine Gay, I can tell you she doesn't seem like the most intelligent or qualified person to run Harvard. She's clearly using the DEI industrial complex to get this cushy job. So how much of this is just about the death of merit?
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel, and a belated Merry Christmas to you and your gorgeous, gorgeous family. The thing that your viewers need to understand is that Claudine Gay is not some mistake that Harvard made. You could not have asked for a better symbol of what Harvard is in 2023 than a serial plagiarist who has no moral compass. And what I mean by that is our universities are no longer institutions of higher learning. They are now simply places where affluent, privileged progressives sit around and confer plaudits and credentials on each other, and then they turn around and say, if you don't have that credential, you don't get the American dream. Because, Rachel, that, of course, is the larger problem here. Thanks in large part to President Obama, we now have an enormous class divide where the American dream is only available if you have a college degree. And if you are working class today, you are second class. That is the larger problem here. And that's why, honestly, Rachel, I hope she doesn't resign. I want Harvard to have to live with the infamy of having a serial plagiarist leading it, because Claudine Gay is not the problem. She's only the person who made the problem visible.
Well, that would be one solution, Batya. I think real justice would be if they just reversed it and gave the job back to Carol Swain, who she plagiarized. That would be real justice in my book. But whatever. You know, they brought in some pretty. You know, this is my glimmer of hope here, Batya. Barack Obama came in and to her defense and is advocating for her job. Those are some pretty big guns. That tells me they're nervous, that this whole game is crumbling. Am I being overly optimistic here? What's your take?
I don't think you're being overly optimistic. I think what we're seeing now is the woke clash. The Democrats have realized that everybody else is onto them and onto how this is nonsense and how their woke agenda was always class warfare against the working class. You're right. They know it and they're scared.
Oh, that is so true. It's always, yes, it's class warfare. It's never been about race. It's always been about class warfare. Batya, you're always spot on. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
New details coming out about the Christmas Eve massacre in Nigeria that left nearly 150 people dead. The attack took place in the country's Plateau state and ran through 15 different villages over the course of a few hours. Nomadic herders used machetes and automatic rifles to carry out the attack. The Muslim attackers ravaged villages, burning down homes and lighting cars and motorcycles on fire. And while that was going on, it took over 12 hours for security agencies to show up in response to the attack. This is a reminder that the persecution of Christians, especially in Africa, the Middle East, and China, is real. And the mainstream media isn't giving this enough attention. The latest attack is the bloodiest violence in Nigeria since 2018, when more than 200 people were killed during a series of fights between the farmers and the herders. That's a Christian-Muslim and fight. Now, watch who you. A trans actor having a meltdown at the airport and accusing a Delta staffer of committing a human rights violation for misgendering him. Tommy Dorfman went on a tirade against a gate agent after a different employee accidentally referred to him as he.
And what about when a Delta employee misgenders you intentionally?
While he's talking, you're talking.
You just misgendered me again.
Okay.
Multiple times.
Gotcha.
Both of you have.
Sorry. Wasn't intentional, but if you want to take it personal, that's also.
Well, she did do it intentionally twice.
You're talking to me too.
You said she and then you said he.
You're being condescending, and if you want to continue, I have full authority to escort you out the building right this moment if you want to play that game with me.
Despite getting ambushed with a camera in his face, the Delta employee handled himself with class and poise, while Tommy tried to film some kind of gotcha moment to get more views on social media. Tommy had a pretty mediocre acting career, but after coming out as a transgender in 2021, Tommy shifted priorities from acting to becoming an online trans activist. Now Tommy has a podcast, and he pals around with people like Dylan Mulvaney, where they talk about such pressing issues such as posting borderline naked photos online.
Last week I showed my nipples on Instagram, like through a see-through dress, and that was really like, thank you. But
Did
it
you
was
get taken down?
The TikTok got taken down. I got a flag. That was my first flag ever on TikTok.
Is this what they think real women sit around and talk about? But the trans psyop isn't just happening in America. Canada is demanding that all government bathrooms, regardless of gender, provide free tampons and menstruation products. What? Regardless of the country, the left is determined to eradicate gender and demean the beauty and purpose of women. Live Action founder and president Lila Rose joins me now. Lila, welcome. Tell me what concerns you the most about the transgender movement.
Well, listen, first of all, looking at what you just said about Canada, I'm going to say something crazy. Men do not need tampons, Rachel, and the Canadian government would be wise to figure that out. But, you know, it's deeply concerning because womanhood is an incredible, beautiful gift, and it's something unique, and it deserves its acknowledgement in society. And to have that completely just hijacked by activists who are calling it a human rights abuse to call a man, the human rights abuse in America today is the fact that we kill 2,500 babies in the womb every single day. It's not that we are treating people with mental health problems and saying, oh, accidentally calling them the wrong pronoun, as they say, when really it's a problem to elevate a mental health problem as the identity of a person. So I think we need a heavy dose of reality here in the U.S. and in Canada and throughout the West. It's a problem creeping throughout the Western world.
Yeah, there's no question about it. What lessons can you learn, or can all of us learn, from the way that Delta employee handled that situation?
I mean, the Delta employee was polite, but he was firm, and he wasn't going to play games. I mean, I think it actually hurts people who struggle with gender dysphoria to play games with their reality and to say that, no, you're not your own sex. You're actually some other idea you have about yourself. It actually is going to hurt them in the long run. We know from stories of detransitioners like Chloe Cole and others that this whole game that we're playing with younger people, especially, to say that you can change your biological sex, which is completely false, you can't, actually harms them in the long run, and they want to detransition later in life, and they struggle with physical problems because of the drugs and the hormones that they were given and the treatments that they were given. So I actually applaud the Delta employee for standing firm in reality, being polite, being kind, but saying, I'm not going to play this game and call you something that you're not.
Yeah, it's a great point. As for Justin Trudeau, I can't understand why that weirdo wants tampons in the bathrooms. I don't know why they want to impose that lunacy on everybody. But clearly, this is an ideology and an agenda that I see no sign of it abating, and that's why it's important that we're talking about it. I want to thank you for joining us, Lila.
Thank you, Rachel. I mean, we don't call babies babies in the womb anymore. We don't call men men anymore, women women. We need to get back to reality, and that starts with biological facts.
Yeah, back to science. Follow the science. Thank you, Lila.
Thanks.
All right. Being a preteen isn't always easy. Boys and girls begin to go through certain changes, and it's normal to be confused as your body begins to develop during puberty. But the everyday discomfort with a changing body is being warped into a false diagnosis of gender dysphoria by Big Pharma and the trans-industrial complex. And instead of reassuring kids that the uneasiness with puberty is typical, many doctors and social media influencers are exploiting vulnerable preteens and encouraging them to seek puberty blockers, which they claim are reversible. And worst of all, they're lying about the dangerous, life-altering effects of this medication.
Hormone blockers are a series of injections and or an implant that you can have put in your arm that temporarily pauses puberty. However, once you stop taking puberty blockers, your body will then go into puberty, and that's why it's only temporary.
As puberty starts, it can be hormone blockers, or puberty blockers, which are totally reversible.
But that's not true at all. Sure, you can prevent yourself from going through puberty with drugs, but the idea that it's completely reversible is a flat-out lie.
I feel a responsibility as a physician to be honest about puberty blockers and hormonal therapy in teenagers. This can lead to infertility, and I don't know if that's really well known. Give your body time to complete the process before you start changing things that could have long-term implications.
And infertility is just one of several possible long-term effects of this drug. Puberty blockers, or Lupron, which is the main drug that is used to halt puberty, is entirely experimental. Now, activists will tell you it's been used for decades, but they don't tell you that it's been used to chemically castrate sex offenders, to treat prostate cancer and endometriosis. This drug was rarely, if ever, used on children until just a few years ago. And to prescribe kids such an intense medication with no long-term research is quite simply medical malpractice. Independent researchers are determining that people taking Lupron long-term or even short-term can experience possible brain, bone, and nerve damage. And when people don't step in and speak out, these kids are left to fend for themselves.
It's my dream now to have children, and it breaks my heart that that could have been taken away from me if I had been encouraged just a little bit more. I just want everyone to consider my own perspective and my own experience as someone who has detransitioned.
I was born biologically female. I began transitioning and taking hormones when I was 18 years old. I had become uncomfortable with how society had seen me as a woman sexually, and so I kind of got completely wrapped into that.
The truth doesn't matter. Whatever I did to my body, it's kind of permanent. I can't fully go back. Sometimes a bitter truth is better than a sweet lie. As I said, I wish somebody just hugged me and said, like, you're not a woman. Like, you're never going to be one, no matter what you do. And
our kids are being experimented on by Big Pharma to create a revolving door of customers. They're permanently medicalizing kids and creating customers for life under the guise of trans acceptance. And if people continue to turn a blind eye, more and more children will become victims of the trans industrial complex, all designed by Big Pharma for big profits. Independent journalist Josh Walkos joins us now. Josh, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit. You've done some deep research into Lupron, this puberty blocking drug. Tell us a little bit more about what worries you.
What worries me is there's no long-term studies that shows that this is going to not cause downstream effects for children as young as 8. You're usually giving them to kids 11 or 12 years old to halt their puberty. But this has been on the market for 38 years. The industry and doctors know the effects that this drug has on adults alone. So I just can't imagine what it's going to do to children who have a mental, or mental anguish. You're going to add this and give them physical anguish. It can thin their bones. It can sterilize them, as you mentioned in the segment. And another thing that I'd like to mention that's rarely mentioned when you cover this drug is that this drug used to be the biggest settlement with the Justice Department in 2001 for false claims and marketing for $875 million. So they kind of forget to tell you that whenever they're saying that this is for gender affirming care. Yeah, it's just terrible what they're doing and giving to these kids with no long-term studies, and basically they are the study. So we're going to have to wait years to see how this affects them.
Yeah, I kind of can get how Big Pharma is just interested in profits in this situation and these lifelong customers that they're creating with these poor children. But I'm just really disgusted at the complicity of doctors who have taken an oath to do no harm, and also of our government, who is clearly not doing enough to regulate this. In fact, they're encouraging it. We see that with Rachel Levine, the so-called, Health and Human Services bureaucrat, who says this is all fine and good. In fact, let's have more of it.
Yeah, I mean, Planned Parenthood's the second leading distributor of hormones and cross-sex hormones. So the government's involved heavily with this. You would think, being that this drug has been on the market for 38 years and it has a profile and there's known side effects, that they would think twice about giving it to children. But as they say, follow the money. When you take a look at how much they're billing insurance for this drug, it's double or triple the cost of what they would give it to for someone with, say, prostate cancer. So it's the first step in the medicalization of these children for their life, because after that, they get the cross-sex hormones, and then it's potential surgeries. They call it a mastectomy, top surgical, euphemistically. So, it's just making a lifelong customer. And we've seen that more and more detransitioners are coming out pleading with us to say, hey, we have to stop this.
Yeah, I'm afraid only lawsuits are going to end this. Josh, thank you for joining us and shining a light on this important topic.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. What's the hidden message in Obama's Apocalypse movie? Stay with us.